3 winters of hunger had led her here, kneeling in the freezing mud beside the grandest carriage in the city. "Please, sir," Ondine whispered, her eyes fixed on the ground. "Only your leftovers. Whatever your table throws away, I would be so grateful." The Duke of Ravenmore looked down at her, and the color drained from his face, because this filthy, starving girl wore the face of the one woman he had loved and lost. And Isidore Beaumont, the richest man in all the city, had spent 18 years swearing his daughter was dead. But she was not dead. She was right here, begging a duke for scraps, with no idea whose blood ran in her veins. So who is Ondine, really? Why would the wealthiest man in the city let his own daughter starve in the streets? And what happens now that a ghost is kneeling at the duke's feet? The duke did not move. For a long breath, he simply stared, as though the ground had opened and given up its dead. Ondine kept her head bowed. She had learned long ago that a lowered gaze earned more mercy than a proud one. 3 winters on the streets of the city had taught her the shape of survival. You did not meet the eyes of powerful men. You did not ask twice. You took what was thrown, and you ran before someone changed their mind. But this man was not throwing anything. He was staring at her, like she had crawled out of a grave. "Girl," he said, and his voice came out cracked. "Look at me." She hesitated. Around them the street went on with its noise, the clatter of hooves, the shouts of the fish sellers, the wet slap of boots through the mud. Snow had begun to fall in slow gray flakes that melted the moment they touched her ragged shawl. Her whole body ached with cold. Her stomach had stopped growling days ago, which frightened her more than the hunger itself. "Please, sir," she whispered again. "I meant no offense. I only saw the fine carriage, and I thought perhaps there might be bread you did not want. I will go. Forgive me. Look at me." Something in his tone made her obey. Slowly, she lifted her face. The Duke of Ravenmore was younger than she expected, perhaps 30, with dark hair and a hard jaw, and eyes the color of a storm before it breaks. He was dressed in black wool, finer than anything she had ever touched, and there were rings on his gloved fingers, worth more than she would earn begging for the rest of her short life. He should have looked at her with disgust. Every other lord did. Instead, his face had gone pale and wounded, and his hand rose halfway toward her before he caught himself and let it fall. "What is your name?" he said. "Ondine, sir." "Ondine," he repeated it softly, as if tasting it. "Only Ondine? No family name?" "None that I know. I was raised in the workhouse near the river until I was old enough to be turned out." She swallowed. "Sir, is something wrong? You look at me strangely." He laughed then, but there was no laughter in it. It was the sound a man makes when he does not know whether to weep. "You have her eyes," he murmured. "God help me. You have her exact eyes." Ondine did not understand. She only knew that the moment had grown too heavy, that people were beginning to stop and watch, that a starving girl kneeling before a duke was the sort of scene that ended badly for the girl. Her instinct screamed at her to flee. She had learned to trust that instinct. It had kept her alive when so many others had frozen in doorways or vanished into the wrong houses and never come out. She began to rise. "I have troubled you enough. Wait." He stepped down from the carriage step and reached for her, and she flinched so violently that he stopped at once. He raised both hands, palms open, the way one gentles a frightened animal. "I will not hurt you. I swear it on my life. Only stay a moment. Are you hungry?" "You are. Of course you are. Forgive me. That was a foolish question." He was speaking too fast now, undone, in a way that a man like him surely never allowed himself to be. "Come inside. Come into the carriage. There is food. There is a fire waiting at my house. Whatever you need." And there it was, the trap she had been warned about since she was a child. A rich man, with a soft voice, and a warm carriage, and an offer too kind to be honest. Every girl she had ever known who accepted such an offer either came back broken or did not come back at all. "No," she said, and stepped away. "Thank you, my lord, but no. I know what such kindness costs." His storm-colored eyes widened, and for a moment, she saw genuine pain flash across his face. "And you think I mean to harm you? It was not a question. You think I am like the others. Aren't you all?" The words left her mouth before she could stop them, sharp and bitter, and she braced for a blow. Powerful men did not suffer insults from gutter girls, but the Duke did not strike her. He only stood there in the falling snow, this great and terrible lord, looking at her as though she had reached into his chest and closed a fist around his heart. "Once," he said quietly, "I let someone I loved walk away because I was too proud to run after her. I have hated myself for it every day of the 18 years since. So no, Ondine, I will not let you walk away too, not until I am certain." Certain of what? He opened his mouth to answer, and that was when the second carriage came around the corner. It was black and gold, and drawn by 4 matched horses, the finest thing on the whole street, and every common person scattered from its path. On its door was a crest that even Ondine recognized, a silver falcon over a red shield, the crest of House Beaumont, the mark of the richest man in the city, a man so far above her that he might as well have lived on the moon. The carriage slowed, a curtain twitched, and through the narrow gap a pair of eyes looked out and found her, and Ondine felt the strange and sudden certainty that she had been seen by something she could not run from. The Duke turned to follow her gaze, and when he saw the falcon crest, his whole body went rigid. "Beaumont," he breathed. "No, not now, not before I have—" He did not finish. The door of the black and gold carriage was already opening, and Ondine, cold and starving, and 18 years lost, stood frozen between 2 powerful men, who both seemed to know exactly who she was, while she alone had no idea at all. Who had she reminded the Duke of? Why did the sight of that silver falcon fill him with dread? And what would happen when the wealthiest man in the city finally stepped down into the snow and looked upon the daughter he had buried in his own heart? The door of the black and gold carriage swung wide, but no one stepped down. For a long moment, nothing happened at all. The horses stamped and snorted in the cold. The snow kept falling, and Ondine stood caught in the open street, between the Duke and that terrible crest, her heart slamming against her ribs, like a bird trying to break free of a cage. "Run," said the voice inside her that had never once been wrong. "Run now, while you still can." But her legs would not obey. Something held her there. Some invisible thread pulled tight between herself and whoever sat hidden behind that twitching curtain. She had felt this only once before in her life. This sense of standing at the edge of something vast that was about to swallow her whole. She had felt it the night the workhouse matron pulled her aside and told her she was old enough now to earn her keep elsewhere, and handed her a thin coat and pushed her out into a city that did not want her. She had been 15 then. She remembered every hour of that first night, the way the cold got into her bones and stayed there, the way the other girls in the alley behind the bakery had looked her over and decided she was competition, not company, the way she had curled into a doorway and cried until she had no tears left, and then had stood up and told herself that crying was a thing she could no longer afford. That was the night Ondine had made her only promise to herself. She would survive. She would not sell what could not be bought back. She would not trust a kind face, or a warm room, or a soft voice, because kindness in this city always came with a price, stitched into its lining, and she had seen what that price did to girls softer than herself. 3 winters she had kept that promise. 3 winters of frozen fingers and empty stomachs, and nights spent walking so she would not freeze in her sleep. She had learned which churches gave bread and which only gave sermons. She had learned which streets were safe after dark and which swallowed girls whole. She had learned to make herself small and quiet and invisible, a shadow among shadows, wanting nothing, needing no one, because wanting and needing were how they got their hooks in you. And now here she was, all her careful survival crumbling, because two powerful men were looking at her as though she were a ghost. Ondine. The Duke's voice pulled her back. He had moved closer, placing himself half between her and the other carriage, and she understood with a jolt that he was shielding her. From what, she could not say. Whatever happens now, I need you to trust me. I know that word means nothing to you. I know you have no reason on this earth to believe a single thing I say. His storm-colored eyes held hers, and there was something raw in them, something almost desperate. But I am begging you, do not run. Not yet. Why should I stay? She whispered. Why do you care what happens to me? You do not know me. That is where you are wrong, he said. I think I have known you your whole life. I only did not know that you were alive. The words made no sense, and yet they went through her like a blade. She stared up at him, this Duke with his fine black wool and his ringed fingers, and his face full of an old grief she could not name, and against every instinct she had spent 3 winters sharpening, she found that she did not want to run from him. It terrified her, that feeling. It was the most dangerous thing she had felt in years, because there was something about him, something in the way he had not struck her when she insulted him, something in the way his hand had trembled when he reached for her. Men who meant harm did not tremble. Men who meant harm did not look at a starving stranger and go pale with sorrow. She did not understand what he wanted from her, but for the first time in longer than she could remember, she found herself wanting to understand a person rather than escape them, and that frightened her more than hunger, more than cold, more than the black and gold carriage waiting with its door hanging open. Who am I to you? She asked, and her voice cracked on the last word. Tell me plainly. I am tired of riddles. I have been cold and alone and hungry my whole life, and now 2 great lords look at me as if I am someone, and I do not know who, and I cannot bear it. So tell me, who am I? The Duke's jaw tightened. She watched the war play out across his face, the longing to speak against some caution that held him back. He glanced once more at the Beaumont carriage, and when he looked at her again, his eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. Your mother, he began. Your mother was Alaric. The name came from the black and gold carriage. A voice at last, low and cold and edged like a knife left out in the frost. It was the voice of a man accustomed to being obeyed the instant he spoke, a voice that had never in its life needed to be raised. The Duke, whose name she now knew was Alaric, went utterly still. Slowly, from within the carriage, a figure emerged. He was older, perhaps 60, with silver hair swept back from a face that must once have been handsome, and was now merely severe. He wore black and gray, and a single silver falcon pinned at his throat, and he carried himself with the awful stillness of a man who owned everything he could see, and most of what he could not. This was Isidore Beaumont, the richest man in the city, the man whose name mothers used to frighten ambitious children, the man who could ruin a family with a word, and did so without a flicker of feeling. And he was looking at Ondine, not at the Duke, not at the crowd, at her. His pale eyes moved over her face slowly, feature by feature, and as they did, something happened to that stern and frozen countenance that Ondine would remember for the rest of her days. It cracked, just slightly, just at the corners of the eyes and the edges of the mouth, as though a statue had felt, for one impossible instant, the ghost of a living thing move beneath its stone. It cannot be, Isidore Beaumont said softly. He took a step forward, then another, and the whole street seemed to hold its breath. You, what is your name, girl? Ondine's mouth had gone dry. Every warning she had ever heeded was screaming at once. She looked to the Duke, who gave the smallest shake of his head, though whether it meant flee or stay she could not tell. "Ondine," she managed. The old man flinched as though struck. "And your mother?" he pressed. Closer now, his cold composure fracturing with every step. "Your mother? What was her name?" "I never knew her," Ondine whispered. "She left me at the workhouse when I was a babe. There was only a token pinned to my blanket. A small thing. I have carried it always." Her hand rose without her willing it to the frayed cord around her neck, where a single object hung hidden beneath her rags. She had never shown it to a living soul. It was the only thing in the world that was hers. A silver charm, shaped like a falcon. The silence that fell was absolute. Isidore Beaumont's face drained of every last shred of color. His hand, so steady a moment ago, began to shake, and the Duke of Ravenmore closed his eyes as though a long-dreaded blow had finally landed. "Show me," the old man breathed. "Show me the charm. Now." And Ondine, standing between the wealthiest man in the city and the Duke who looked at her like a resurrection, felt the whole weight of 18 unknown years pressing down upon that small silver falcon against her heart, and knew with sudden and dizzying certainty that whatever she pulled from beneath her rags would change everything, forever, for all of them. Her fingers closed around the cord. Why did the richest man in the city tremble at the sight of a beggar's charm? What did that silver falcon mean, and why had her mother left it as her only inheritance? And when Ondine finally draws it into the light, whose world will shatter first? The Duke's, the old man's, or her own? Her fingers were stiff with cold, and it took her 3 tries to loosen the knot in the frayed cord. The whole street had gone silent. Even the snow seemed to fall more slowly, as though the sky itself leaned in to watch. Then the charm came free, and Ondine held it up into the gray winter light. It was small, no larger than a thumbnail, a silver falcon with its wings half spread, worn smooth in places by 18 years of a child's frightened touch. She had held it in the workhouse dark, when the older girls were cruel. She had pressed it to her lips on the coldest nights, whispering to a mother she could not remember, asking why she had been left, asking whether she had ever been loved even for a moment. It was tarnished now, and one wing was slightly bent, but the shape was unmistakable. It was the twin of the silver falcon pinned at Isidore Beaumont's throat. The old man made a sound she had never heard a grown man make before, a low, broken thing torn from somewhere deep in his chest. He staggered. One of his own footmen leapt forward to catch his arm, and Beaumont shoved him away with a violence that shocked the whole street. He came toward Ondine on unsteady legs, his cold composure gone entirely now, his pale eyes fixed on the charm, as though it were the last light in a drowning world. "Where?" he choked. "Where did you get that? Tell me now." "It was pinned to my blanket," Ondine whispered, clutching it to her chest, suddenly afraid he meant to take it from her. "It was the only thing she owned. The matron kept it locked away until I left. She said whoever gave me up wanted me to have it. It is mine. It has always been mine. Please, I am not a thief." "No." The word broke from him like a sob. "No, child, you are not a thief. That charm was struck from the same silver as mine. There were only 2 ever made. I had them fashioned the year I married. One for me." His hand rose trembling to the falcon at his throat. "And one for my wife, for Marisol." The name meant nothing to Ondine, and yet the way he spoke it, the reverence and the ruin in it, made her chest ache. Beside her, the Duke had gone very quiet. When she glanced at him, she saw that his eyes were wet, and that he was looking at old Beaumont with an expression caught somewhere between grief and fury, as though he had waited 18 years to see this man brought low, and now found that it gave him no pleasure at all. "You buried an empty coffin," Alaric said, and his voice was quiet, but it carried. "Did you not, Isidore? 18 years ago you told the whole city your wife had died in childbed and taken the babe with her. You held a funeral. You wore black for a year, and all of it was a lie. Beaumont's head snapped up. For a moment, the old power flared back into his face, the fury of a man not accustomed to being challenged. You know nothing, boy. I know she came to me the night before she vanished, the Duke said. I know she was terrified of you. I know she begged me to help her get away. And God forgive me, I hesitated. I told her to think, to wait, to be certain. And by morning she was gone, and you were telling the world she was dead. His hands had curled into fists. I have spent 18 years believing my hesitation killed her. And now this girl kneels in the mud, wearing Marisol's face and Marisol's charm. And I begin to wonder what truly happened in your house that winter. Ondine's mind was spinning. She could barely breathe. These two great men were speaking of her mother, of a wife who fled, of a funeral for the living, and every word landed on her like a blow. Marisol. Her mother had a name. Her mother had been afraid. Her mother had run. Stop, she said, and both men turned. Please, you speak over my head as though I am not here, as though I am a thing to be argued over. Her voice shook, but she did not lower it. 3 winters of silence and invisibility broke open inside her all at once. For 18 years, I did not know my own name. I begged for scraps. I slept in doorways. I nearly died in the cold more times than I can count, and no one came. No one. If my mother was this man's wife, if I am someone, then where were you? Where were either of you while I starved? The words rang out across the frozen street. A crowd had gathered now, whispering, staring, but Ondine no longer cared. Something fierce and long buried was rising in her, the same steel that had kept her alive, and it would not be quiet any longer. Isidore Beaumont looked at her, this ragged, furious girl, and the last of his stone crumbled to nothing. I did not know, he whispered. I swear before God, I did not know you lived. Your mother took you and vanished. I searched. For years I searched, and I found nothing, and I believed you both dead. His voice failed him. If I had known. Ondine, if I had known you were here, in my own city, wanting bread, I would have burned the world to find you. She wanted to believe him. That was the danger. Standing there in the falling snow, cold and starving, and 18 years alone, she wanted so badly to believe that somewhere in the world there was a father who would have burned the world for her, that she felt her carefully built walls beginning to crack, and she did not know if she could survive it if they crumbled, and the man behind them proved false. Come home, Beaumont said, extending a shaking hand. Come home, daughter. Let me give you everything I could not give you all these years. Ondine stared at the hand, at the rings, at the silver falcon, at the father she had dreamed of on 1,000 freezing nights. And then she looked at the Duke, at Alaric, who was watching her with his heart in his eyes, who had loved her mother, and hesitated and lost her, who now looked as though he feared he would lose the daughter the very same way. Something passed between them in that moment, something she had no name for, warm and painful and utterly new, and she understood with a strange certainty that whatever she chose now would bind her to both these men in ways she could not yet see. She took one step toward her father's hand. Then, from the edge of the crowd, a voice rang out, sharp and panicked. My Lord Beaumont! A word, urgently. It concerns the girl. There is something you must know before you take her into your house. Something about the night your wife fled. My lord, she did not flee alone. Beaumont froze with his hand still outstretched. The Duke turned sharply toward the voice. And Ondine, one step from the father she had longed for all her life, felt the ground shift beneath her once again. Who was this stranger, and what did he know of the night her mother vanished? If Marisol did not flee alone, then who went with her, and where were they now? And why did the Duke's face turn ashen at those final words, as though he feared what was about to be spoken aloud? The stranger pushed through the crowd, and Ondine saw that he was a thin man in a clerk's plain coat, perhaps 50, with nervous hands and eyes that would not settle. He clutched his hat to his chest and bowed low before Beaumont, though there was something in the set of his shoulders that looked less like respect and more like fear. "Forgive me, my lord," he said. "You will not remember me. I was a groom in your household 18 years ago. Torvald was my name then, and is still. I saw what happened the night my lady Marisol left. I have carried it all these years, and when I heard the whispers just now in the street, that a girl with the falcon charm had appeared, I could not stay silent any longer." Beaumont lowered his outstretched hand slowly. His whole body had gone rigid. "Speak then, but be warned. If you spread lies about my wife, I will see you ruined." "It is no lie, my lord." Torvald's voice trembled. "That night, I was in the stable, when my lady came running through the snow, with the babe wrapped in her cloak. She was weeping. She begged me to ready a horse, and she was not alone." His eyes flicked toward the Duke, then away, quick as a frightened animal. "There was a man with her. He helped her onto the horse. He rode out with her into the dark. I never saw either of them again." The whole street seemed to lean in. Ondine's heart was pounding so hard she felt sick with it. "Who?" Beaumont said, very low. "Who was the man?" Torvald swallowed. "I did not see his face clearly, my lord. It was dark, and the snow was heavy. But I saw his cloak. It bore a crest." He hesitated, and the hesitation was terrible. A raven, a black raven upon silver. The crest of House Ravenmore. Every eye turned to the Duke. Alaric had gone white as the snow around them. "No," he said. "No, that is impossible. I did not go with her. I told you. I hesitated. I let her leave alone. That is the shame I have carried." "You said she came to you the night before," Ondine whispered. The pieces were turning in her mind, cold and sharp. "You said you hesitated, but this man says a rider in your crest carried her away. Both cannot be true." "Ondine," the Duke turned to her, and there was panic in his eyes now, raw and unguarded. "I swear to you, I did not take her. Someone wore my colors. Someone used my house's name that night. I have spent 18 years not knowing what happened after she left my door, and I am telling you the truth. I do not know who rode with her." But Beaumont was no longer listening to protests. His grief had curdled into something far more dangerous. He advanced on the Duke with his cane raised like a weapon, his silver hair wild, his voice a roar that cracked across the frozen street. "You took her. You took my wife and my child. All these years you have played the grieving friend, and it was you. You stole them into the night, and you let me bury an empty box and mourn like a fool." "I did not." The Duke stood his ground. "Isidore, listen to me. If a man in my crest took her, then someone in my own house betrayed us both. Do you not see? We were both deceived that night. Someone wanted her gone, and wanted the blame to fall on me, and for 18 years it has." "Lies." "Then explain the child." Alaric's voice rose to match his. "If I stole your wife away to some secret life, why does her daughter stand before us dressed in rags, half-starved, raised in a workhouse by the river not 2 miles from your own front door? Would I have let the woman I loved rot in poverty? Would I have let her child beg for scraps in the very city where I live? Use your reason, man. Whoever took Marisol did not take her to safety. They took her to be rid of her." The words fell like a hammer, and the fury drained slowly from Beaumont's face, replaced by a dawning horror, far worse than rage. Ondine could not breathe. To be rid of her. Her mother had run from this cold and terrible house, had trusted someone who wore a stolen crest, and that someone had not saved her. Marisol had vanished, and her child had been left at a workhouse door with nothing but a silver falcon, alone, while both these men mourned a lie. "Then where is she?" Ondine heard herself say. Her voice came out very small in the sudden quiet. "If she did not run away to a happy life, and she did not die in childbed, then where is my mother? Is she alive? Has she been alive all this time, somewhere, while Her voice broke, and she could not finish. No one answered, and the silence was its own terrible reply. It was Torvald who spoke at last, so quietly she almost missed it. There was a house, my lord, on the north road, past the mill. I heard the rider name it to the horse as they left, low, like a secret. I never dared go there. I was afraid, but if my lady lived, if she was taken somewhere against her will, it would be there. It is the only place I know to name. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Beaumont turned to Ondine, and the change in him was total. The stone was gone. The fury was gone. What stood before her now was simply an old man who had lost everything and had just been handed the smallest, most terrible thread of hope. "Daughter," he said, and his voice shook on the word. "I do not ask you to forgive me. I have no right. But I am going to that house tonight, and I am going to learn the truth of what was done to your mother, whatever it costs me. And I would give the rest of my fortune and the rest of my years to have you at my side when I do." Ondine looked at him, then at the Duke, who stood apart now, wounded and accused, and yet still watching her with those storm-colored eyes, as though she were the only thing in the world that mattered. "I am coming too," Alaric said. "Isidore, you may hate me, you may believe the worst of me, and I cannot stop you. But I loved Marisol. Whatever was done to her was done in my name, with my crest, and I will not sit idle while you go to face it. If there is a chance she lives, I must know. I owe her that. I owe her 18 years of it." Beaumont stared at the man he had just accused of the greatest betrayal of his life, and Ondine watched something pass between the two of them, some old and complicated grief that bound them together as surely as it tore them apart. At last, the old man gave a single stiff nod. "Then we ride together," he said. "God help us both." Ondine stood between them as the servants scrambled to ready the horses. This girl who an hour ago had knelt begging for leftovers and now found herself the daughter of the wealthiest man in the city, bound for a house on the north road where the truth of her mother waited in the dark. Her heart was a storm of things she could not name: fear, hope, a longing so sharp it hurt. And beneath it all, threaded through everything, was the Duke's face, and the strange warm ache that rose in her every time she looked at him, a feeling she had no right to and could not stop. She did not know what waited in that house. She did not know if her mother lived or lay long dead in some unmarked ground. She did not know whether the man beside her was a betrayer or the truest heart she had ever known. But she knew she was done being invisible. She knew she would learn the truth tonight, whatever it cost her. She climbed into the carriage between the two men who had shattered and remade her world in the space of a single hour, and the horses surged forward into the falling snow, north, toward the house where everything had begun. What waits for them in the house on the north road? Is Marisol alive after all these years? Or will they find only the cold proof of a crime long buried? Who wore the Duke's crest that night? And do they still walk free among the people Ondine has just learned to call her own? And as her heart draws closer to Alaric with every turn of the wheel, will the truth they uncover bind them together, or tear them apart forever? The house on the north road stood dark against the snow, a crumbling thing half swallowed by ivy and neglect, its windows black and blind. No smoke rose from the chimney, no light showed within. Ondine's heart sank at the sight of it, for it had the look of a place where nothing living had breathed in years. The carriage had barely stopped before Beaumont was down in the snow, his cane forgotten, moving toward the door with the desperate speed of a much younger man. The Duke followed close, and Ondine came after, her ragged shawl whipping in the wind, her whole body trembling with cold and dread, and a hope she was terrified to hold. The door was locked. Beaumont struck it with his shoulder once, twice, and on the third blow, the old wood gave way with a shriek, and they stumbled into the dark. Inside, the air was thick with dust and mold, and the ghost of a fire long dead. A single candle stub sat on a table, and the Duke found flint and struck it, and the small flame threw its trembling light across a scene that stopped all three of them where they stood. The room had been lived in, not richly, not comfortably, but lived in. There was a narrow bed against the wall, a chair, a basin, and on every surface, on the walls, on scraps of paper pinned and nailed and wedged into every crack, were drawings, falcons. Hundreds of them, sketched in charcoal and ash and what might have been blood, silver falcons with their wings half spread, the same shape as the charm around Ondine's neck, drawn again and again by a hand that had clearly been losing its mind to grief and loneliness. "Marisol," Beaumont whispered. He turned in a slow circle, his face crumbling. She was here. She was kept here. All these years, 2 miles from my door. "My lord." The voice came from the shadows in the far corner, and they all spun toward it. A woman sat there in the dark, so thin and gray and still that they had not seen her at first, mistaking her for a heap of rags upon a chair. She was old before her time, her hair white, her hands like birds' claws. But when the candlelight found her face, Ondine felt the whole world tilt beneath her feet. She had seen that face before. She saw it every time she caught her reflection in a puddle or a pane of glass. It was her own face, worn by decades of sorrow. "Mother," Ondine breathed. The woman's eyes lifted slowly, clouded and confused, and then they found the girl, and something broke open in them, some light that had been buried under years of darkness, struggling back toward the surface. "You have her charm," Marisol whispered. "The falcon. I gave it to my baby. I pinned it to her blanket before he took her from me, before he told me she was dead." Her voice cracked into a sob. "He told me she died. Every day for 18 years he told me my baby was dead." "Who?" Beaumont said, falling to his knees before her, taking her frail hands in his own. "Who kept you here, Marisol? Who told you these lies? Who wore the Ravenmore crest and stole you from me?" But Ondine already knew. She had felt it circling closer all night, the answer, waiting in the dark. And now it stepped through the broken door behind them, out of the falling snow, and spoke in a voice she recognized. "I did." They turned. Torvald stood in the doorway, but he was not cringing now. He was not the frightened clerk who had bowed and stammered in the street. He stood straight, and in his hand was a pistol, and his nervous, darting eyes had gone cold and flat and calm. "You," the Duke said. "It was you all along. The groom. You wore my crest." "I served House Beaumont for 30 years, Torvald said, and his voice was terrible in its quietness. "I loved her from the first day I saw her, my Lady Marisol, and she never once looked at me. She looked at you, my Lord Duke, with your title and your fine raven cloak. So when she came to the stable that night, weeping, begging to be taken away, I took her, in your colors, so that if anyone saw, the blame would fall on you. I did not ride her to freedom. I rode her here, and I kept her, because if I could not have her love, I would at least have her near, where no other man could take her from me." His mouth twisted. "I let her believe her child was dead, so she would have nothing left to run toward. And I told the babe's matron nothing, so the girl would vanish into the poor and never be found." His eyes moved to Ondine, and something like regret flickered there and died. "I did not expect the falcon charm to survive. I did not expect you to survive. You should have died in that workhouse like the others." The candle guttered. For one frozen heartbeat, no one moved. Then Beaumont surged up with a roar of 18 years of grief, and Torvald swung the pistol toward him, and Ondine saw with awful clarity that her father was about to die in front of her, before she had known him even one full day. She did not think. She moved. She threw herself against her father, shoving the old man aside just as the pistol cracked, and the sound was enormous in the small room, and something struck her, a blow like a fist to the shoulder that spun her round and dropped her to the floor. Ondine! The Duke was already moving. Before Torvald could cock the weapon again, Alaric was upon him, and the two men crashed into the wall in a tangle of fury, and Ondine, dazed on the cold floor with a warmth spreading down her arm, watched the Duke wrench the pistol free and strike the groom down with it, once, and the man crumpled and did not rise. Then Alaric was on his knees beside her, gathering her against his chest, his hands pressing at her wounded shoulder, his face wild with a terror she had never seen in him before. "No," he was saying. "No, no, stay with me. Look at me, Ondine. Look at me. I have you. I have you. Do not you dare leave me now, that I have only just found you." Her mother was weeping. Her father was shouting for help. And Ondine, bleeding in the arms of the Duke who had loved her mother, and now looked at her as though she were his whole heart, felt the pain, and the cold, and the 18 lonely years all begin to fade beneath one single overwhelming truth. She was not invisible. She was not alone. Someone was holding her as though she were the most precious thing in the world. "You came for me," she whispered up at him. "Always," Alaric said, his tears falling onto her face. "Always. Do you hear me? Never again will you be alone. Never again." But her eyes were fluttering closed, and the warmth was still spreading, and the last thing she saw before the darkness took her was his face bent over hers, begging her to stay. Will Ondine survive the wound she took, to save the father she had only just found? Now that the truth is out and the villain has fallen, can the years of stolen life ever be mended? For Marisol, for Beaumont, for the girl who lost everything and found it all in a single day. And as Ondine slips into the dark, with the Duke's tears upon her face, is this the beginning of their love, or the cruelest ending of all? The darkness did not keep her. Ondine woke to warmth, and for a long, confused moment she did not understand it, for warmth was a thing she had learned to live without. She lay in a bed softer than anything she had ever known, beneath blankets that smelled of lavender and clean linen, and a fire crackled low in a great stone hearth across the room. Her shoulder ached beneath a wrapping of bandages, a deep and steady pain, but she was alive. She was warm, and when she turned her head upon the pillow, she found the Duke asleep in a chair beside her bed, his coat abandoned, his dark hair fallen across his brow, one of his hands still wrapped around hers, as though he had not let go for a single hour. She did not move. She lay there and watched him breathe, this great and terrible lord who had wept over her on a cold stone floor, and something inside her that had been clenched tight for 18 years, slowly, carefully, began to unclench. "You are awake." The voice was soft and came from the doorway. Ondine turned to see her mother standing there, thin and gray still, but washed and dressed in warm clothes now, her white hair brushed, her eyes clearer than they had been in that terrible house. Behind her stood Beaumont, and the old man's face, when he saw his daughter's open eyes, crumpled with a relief so total that he had to grip the doorframe to stay upright. "The physician said you would live," Marisol whispered, coming to the bedside. She reached out one trembling hand and touched her daughter's face, tracing her features as though memorizing them, as though she could not yet believe that this was real. "My baby, my little falcon, I held you for one night before he took you from me, and I have grieved you every day since, and now you are here, grown and brave, and you took a bullet meant for your father." Her tears fell freely. "I have so much to make up to you, a whole life of it. I do not know where to begin." "You are alive," Ondine said, and her own eyes filled. "That is where we begin. You are alive, and you are here, and no one will ever take you anywhere again." The commotion had woken the Duke. He stirred, and his hand tightened around hers, and when he saw her eyes open and clear, his whole face transformed, with a joy so unguarded that it made her breath catch. "Ondine," he breathed, "you came back." "You told me to stay," she said softly, "so I stayed." Beaumont came forward then, and knelt at the bedside beside his wife, and for a moment, the three of them simply held one another, this family that had been shattered and scattered for 18 years, and was now, impossibly, whole again, in a warm room, while the snow fell soft and harmless beyond the glass. Ondine, who had knelt in the mud that very morning begging for scraps, lay surrounded by a mother, a father, and a man whose eyes never left her face, and she understood that the world could remake itself entirely in the span of a single day. Torvald was gone. He had been taken by the magistrate in the night, Beaumont told her quietly, and would answer for every year he had stolen. But her father did not linger on the man. There would be time enough for justice. What mattered now was here, in this room, in the faces of the living. In the days that followed, Ondine healed slowly, and as her body mended, so did the family around her. Marisol grew stronger with each passing day, the light returning to her eyes, the years of captivity loosening their grip. Beaumont, who had ruled his empire with a fist of cold iron, became a different man beneath his own roof, gentle and unsure, learning how to be a father to a grown daughter he had mourned as dead. He gave her everything, and she took little of it, for she had learned to want almost nothing, and it broke his heart, and mended it at once, to watch her marvel at small kindnesses that other daughters would take for granted. A warm meal, a pair of shoes that fit, a door that locked from the inside so that she might feel safe. And the Duke came every day. He did not press her. He did not speak of feelings while she was weak and healing, for he was a better man than the boy who had once hesitated and lost the woman he loved. But he came every day, and he sat with her, and he told her stories of her mother as a young woman, laughing and fearless and kind, so that Ondine might know the person Marisol had been before grief hollowed her out. And Ondine told him of her own years, the cold and the hunger, and the small, fierce victories of survival, and he listened as though every word were precious, and neither of them spoke of what was growing between them, though both of them felt it in every silence. It was on a bright, cold morning, weeks later, when Ondine was strong enough to walk in the garden, that Alaric finally spoke. Snow lay clean and white over everything, and the two of them stood beneath a bare tree, and he took her hand and looked at her with those storm-colored eyes gone suddenly uncertain. "I have loved twice in my life," he said quietly. "The first time I hesitated, and I lost her, and I have carried that grief for 18 years. I swore I would never make that mistake again." He drew a breath. "So, I will not hesitate now. Ondine, I do not care that you were raised in a workhouse. I do not care what you wore the day I met you. I have never in my life seen anyone as brave as you, and I do not wish to spend another day pretending I do not love you. I know it is soon. I know you have only just found your family. I will wait as long as you need, but I needed you to know." Ondine looked up at him, at this man who had come for her, who had held her in the dark and begged her to stay, and she felt the last of her old walls, the walls of 3 long winters, crumble quietly into the snow. "I spent my whole life learning not to want things," she whispered, "because wanting was how the world hurt you. But I want this. I want you. You are the first thing I have ever let myself want, and I am not afraid of it." A tear slipped down her cheek, and she was smiling. "So do not wait, Alaric. I have waited 18 years for a life. I do not wish to wait one moment more." He drew her to him then, gently, mindful of her healing shoulder, and he kissed her beneath the bare tree in the falling snow. And Ondine, who had knelt in the mud that first gray morning, with nothing in the world but a silver falcon and a promise to survive, wrapped her arms around the man she loved, and understood at last that she had done far more than survive. She had come home, and somewhere in the warm house behind them, a mother watched from a window with tears of joy upon her face, and a father stood beside her with his hand upon her shoulder, and the falcon charm that had traveled through 18 years of darkness caught the winter light and shone. This is where our story finds its peace, but every ending is also a beginning. What life now waits for Ondine as a duchess, a daughter, a woman who has finally claimed her own name? What enemies might rise against a family so suddenly restored to power and love? And what new secrets still sleep in the great houses of the city, waiting for their turn to wake? That, my dear friends, is a story for another day. If this tale has touched your heart the way it has touched mine, if you cheered for Ondine and wept for Marisol and fell just a little in love with the Duke, then tap that subscribe button and stay close, because I have many more stories like this one to share with you, and I would be so grateful to tell them to you. Until next time, keep your heart open and never stop believing that the coldest winter can still end in spring.